The trade deadline has come, the trade deadline has gone, and even I can't keep track of everything that Baltimore did. I don't know what's up.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans. Welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. Today's episode of Locked On MLB is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code all lowercase LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or whatever it's called now, and on Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. And nobody got our trivia question right. I got a flurry of guesses, but who was the first Tampa Bay Rays All-Star? And the answer was Rolando Araujo. Rolando Araujo was a big Cuban prospect and looked like he was going to be the next great ace pitcher. He had a couple of decent years, and he kind of got bounced around a little bit. Wound up playing for the Red Sox for about, a minute and a half. And yes, so it's the answer to that question. They were called the Devil Rays back then. All right, the trade deadline has come and gone. And, there's a lot of articles that are going to be written over the next bunch of days, talk about who won the trade deadline, who won this or that. To me, the most impressive move was towards the end, the Dodgers picking up Jack Flaherty from Detroit. I thought was very impressive. We'll talk a little bit later about the flurry of moves that the San Diego Padres did, but I think Tanner Scott coming over from the Marlins to San Diego just shows, first of all, the Marlins are a Mickey Mouse organization. They're not a serious organization. They've traded everything away. Who knows? Maybe they cleaned up. Maybe they cleaned up on this, and it'll all come back. But that kind of made me scratch my head there a little bit. It was the Padres also acquired an outfielder from the Yankees named Brandon Lockridge in the deal for De Los Santos and Balboni Jr. They picked up Martin Perez. The bunch of moves here or there. The Red Sox pick up Luis Garcia from the Angels. I thought it was a smart move. And then Kevin Kiermaier, whose career is going to be over at the end of this year, is going over the Dodgers, essentially to give them some outfield depth. Speaking of outfield depth, Mark Canha is going to basically take over Jorge Soler's role with the Giants. And he came over pretty cheaply from the Detroit Tigers. But the team that I just can't help but look at and go, wow, they made a lot of moves for a team that is in first place, currently in first place by themselves going into the last day of July. The Baltimore Orioles absolutely have just made move after move after move. Now, some of them, I guess, seem to make sense. And the Orioles they're a team that a lot of people picked. I picked them to win the American League pennant. They're in first place by themselves right now, still, only by half a game over the Yankees. But they have 64 wins. So do the Yankees, by the way. The Cleveland Indians have the most in the American League with 65, as do the Philadelphia Phillies, also 65. But, the Orioles are having a fine season, but they've had their bumps and bruises. There hasn't been as, I had to scratch my nose there for a second, hasn't been as wildly publicized as the Yankees' ups and downs, but the Orioles have allowed the Yankees to hang around even when the Yanks had that really lousy middle part of the season. Well, they picked up Eloy Jimenez to basically difficult job. They acquired Austin Slater so they can get a new outfielder in there. Who else? They picked up Gregory Soto from the Phillies, which is, I mean, it's fine. Soto, put him into the bullpen. Obviously, they want to be working on their bullpen a little bit here. There was who else? They obviously they made the big trade picking up Sir Anthony Dominguez earlier from Philadelphia, and that trade, which I get it. Sir Anthony Dominguez could be a good depth reliever for their run to go to the World Series this year. I did think it came at a strange cost, and I brought this up before. The fact that they trade away Austin Hayes, very popular player and a positive person in the clubhouse, which I guess his role, as I said, is replaced by Eloy Jimenez. But in comes Sir Anthony Dominguez and Christian Pache, who is constantly playing for different teams, and Zach Eflin is coming over from the Rays. The move where they brought in the Orioles swung a deal with the Marlins that I mentioned, and I mean, I understand that sometimes you're trying to capture lightning in a bottle, and sometimes you're trying to get a quality player who's having a downside, and you hope they play at the back of their baseball card. But Trevor Rogers of Miami is, he's not having a great year with Miami. Maybe playing for a contending team will help turn things around. It did cost them Connor Norby, who was one of their top prospects. Now, I've been screaming for the Orioles to not be so precious with their prospects. I think they could have done better than Trevor Rogers, but we'll see. We'll see. And evidently Jackson Holiday is coming up now too. But when the smoke clears, the Orioles are going to have roughly 7, maybe as many as 8 new players on the roster for the final third of the season. And I understand they're just numbers. They're not people, and things like, chemistry and things like that we're not supposed to look at. But there is a Rubik's Cube to a team. And when you start taking away Hazen, one who was part of the team that got him to this point, and you're now going to basically bring in almost a third of a new roster for the final third of the season, this could break a couple of different ways. And I always think back to the Yoenis Cespedes trade, where the team made the deal, which you could make all the intellectual arguments in the world for, but you saw the team fell apart after that, and you saw the offense crater. This could be a brilliant series of moves for Baltimore. That's why I'm not going to – it's absolutely insane to go right now and say who the winners and the losers are of the trade deadline. It's absolute lunacy to do that, because you will tell this. You won't be able to make this decision until the end of the World Series. If a player who was brought in an obscure trade winds up being a massive help in winning a World Series, then that team, probably has won the trade deadline. It's not always the biggest names who makes the biggest impact. Baltimore did indeed win the game tonight against the Toronto Blue Jays. The Blue Jays, again, they held on to Vladimir Guerrero Jr., which I'm glad, because I'd like to see him succeed in Toronto. I'd like to see him be a big star in Toronto. And you saw Santander be the big hero today. He doubled and homered. And you saw Sir Anthony Dominguez close the game out, and Burns, who's the big pickup in the offseason, pitched well. So who knows? Maybe this will give the team a spark. Maybe this team needed to have an overhaul or an influx of players. Or this could be a move where suddenly the team just doesn't quite look and feel right and they go on a slump. This is all stuff we're not going to know until the end of the playoffs. I admire the team for being aggressive, but were they too aggressive? Bringing in a third of a new roster with 2 months to go is a risky proposition. You're assuming that they're going to be able to put this team together on the run. If it works, then this was a brilliant, brilliant trade deadline. If it doesn't, well, then we're going to take a good long look and say, oh man, did they panic? Hey, let's talk a little bit about our good friends over at PrizePicks. You know what PrizePicks is. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the PrizePicks community today. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks. With as little as 4 correct picks, you can turn $10 into $1,000. PrizePicks is available in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks for a deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. With PrizePicks, it really is that easy. PrizePicks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. Hey, where is your hub for all your sports news? Where do you go for the newest takes, for the newest news out there? Head on over to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day with the biggest stories without all of the fuss and the muss. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I was on that show today. I was on that show talking about the trade deadline. I said that this was a trade deadline that was kind of like Blake Snell winning his Cy Young Awards. It was like, okay, there wasn't anything spectacular, but there were some good things. There wasn't that massive blockbuster. Jack Flaherty's the closest thing, and maybe you say Kikuchi trade, maybe. But, I mean, there wasn't a big star making the big jump that really, that really just sort of stuck out big time. I mean, I suppose, the San Diego Padres, making the deal to bolster their bullpen, say that 5 times fast, with, the trade that was made for, the trade that they made with the Marlins when they picked up Tanner Scott. Good on the Padres, by the way. They made a bunch of moves too, and they've done a lot to bolster their bullpen. And they have a real set plan, and it's clear what their plan is. Their plan is to try to go into October with the greatest number of pitchers, decent pitchers in their staff. They took one look at some of the teams that have gone deep into the postseason the last few years from the National League, and they tend not to be the 100-win teams that dominate the regular season. The Nats, the Braves, the Phillies, the Diamondbacks, the last bunch of years, it hasn't been the big, huge winners who have represented the National League, except, of course, LA in the COVID year, which I don't discount, but it's still more often than not you see a National League team do well because they stockpiled some pitchers. And that's exactly what San Diego did. And there's also some really solid mojo that's going on in San Diego. You probably missed what happened if you don't live on the West Coast. But the Dodgers were in San Diego, and Los Angeles scored 5 runs in the top of the first. The Padres were down 5 runs before they even came to bat. And give the Padres credit. Give the Padres credit for not letting the Dodgers score another run. Yes, Waldron, my favorite knuckleballer, let up 5 runs, but then he didn't let up another run for the next 3 innings. And then it was just a parade of relievers, keeping the Dodgers scoreless. They chipped away now. And next thing you know, it was a home run by Machado, home run by Merrill, tied the game, sent into the 10th inning, and the Padres walked off. And with that, again, in this razor-thin National League wild card, the Padres won again. They've won 8 out of their last 10 games. They're a half game ahead of Arizona. The Pirates are being sneaky. They're only 2 games out. The Cardinals have made a bunch of trades. They're only 2 games out. And so, yeah, it could be absolutely jam-packed there. But the Padres are just basically saying, make the dance with this current pitching staff and take your chances. Now, my nose is itchy. A lot of Yankee fans are already giving Brian Cashman grief because they didn't make the big move for a pitcher. They got periphery pitchers, but they didn't get the big, huge pitcher that they felt they needed. And there's whispering, were they not allowed to look at the medical reports through Jack Flaherty or something? I don't know, some shot ear conspiracy theory going on right now. But I'll tell you something. I'm not one to give Cashman credit, but the Jazz Chisholm trade, you can't ask for more than that deal. He has sparked this lineup. Another 2 home run game for Jazz Chisholm, playing third base because for reasons unknown to anyone, Torres won't get off of second base. But look at today. It was 2 more home runs, 5 more runs batted in for him, and giving the Yankees that additional spark. And Judge had yet another massive day. Soto had another day. Soto got on base 3 times. Judge got on base 5 times. Chisholm was 3 for 5 with 5 runs batted in. Even Verdugo got on base a couple of times. This is a Yankee team that's getting its mojo back. And this was on a day where Garrett Cole had to be scratched, and they were playing the Phillies, and the Yankees blew leads in both the 9th and the 11th inning and still held on to win. Of all the nastiness and all the awfulness and fire Cashman, fire Boone, where's the accountability? Here we are going into the final day of August, and the New York Yankees have the 2nd highest number of wins in the American League and are only a half game back, tied in the win column with Baltimore. All they have to do is win tomorrow. I mean, how much has changed in Yankee land since that Trent Grisham hit bounced off the Fenway wall with 2 outs in the 9th inning and the Yankees on the verge of losing another series? Their mojo is back. And so tomorrow they are looking to sweep the Phillies. Sanchez, fine pitcher. Cortez still hanging around. But we're going to see. But this Yankee team has its mojo back, as I said. This Yankee team has a swagger again. And then they're going to be coming back to the Bronx to play the Blue Jays, who are a mess. So, and the fans in New York are going to be welcoming Jazz Chisholm, who seems to be taking to the Yankees like a fish to water. A sleeping giant has been awoken in the Bronx, and because the Orioles didn't put them away in the middle third of the season, the Yankees have as good a shot as anybody to win that division. And, of course, which brings me back to the point I made from the first section of the show. Now the Orioles have a much different configuration. They have a lot of new faces, a lot of new combinations, and a razor-thin lead. Is that going to be enough? Will they regret it? Should the Yankees have picked up another pitcher? I don't know. They probably should have, but they didn't. And right now, it looks like they may have the offense to make up the difference. Let's talk to our friends over at SupplyHouse. Order supplies from the website that's made for skilled trades. Find thousands of parts from hundreds of brands just a couple of clicks away at SupplyHouse.com. SupplyHouse.com gives you 24/7 access to a huge selection of plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with fast delivery anywhere in the United States. Need help with an order? Get industry-leading after-sales service from their friendly and knowledgeable customer support team. Talk to a real person every time. And there's great news for plumbers, technicians, and contractors. Being a pro has its perks. Trade industry professionals can join their free Trade Master program for free shipping and serious discounts on every order. Over 100,000 pros already trust the Trade Master program to deliver results. Apply for your membership today and get a competitive edge at every order at supplyhouse.com/TM. Save money and time when you order online. Order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service at supplyhouse.com. Hey, this is a reminder that Locked On has begun, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, and you can find Locked On Sports today on YouTube or in the free Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Hey, speaking of a team that has gone through some disastrous moments recently, but now find themselves maybe in a position to dust themselves off, let's hear it for the Seattle Mariners. Now, granted, they smacked around the Boston Red Sox, which usually doesn't make me happy. But right now, as we're going into the final day of July and the trade deadline in our rearview mirror, at this moment, the Seattle Mariners are in first place by themselves. Granted, they're tied in the loss column with the Houston Astros, but the Mariners have 2 more wins. And the fact that the Astros have had a little bit of trouble with the Pittsburgh Pirates recently, and today was no different. You had another Michael A. Taylor home run. You got a great diving catch from Reynolds, and with that, the Astros fell to the Pirates 6-2, and also the Red Sox, who got off to a lead against the Mariners, but it wound up being a real slugfest. 10-6, a 5-run 5th inning led by Dylan Moore's double basically sealed the deal. So here we are. We're going to the final days of July, and the fate of the Mariners, it's in their own hands right now. Rosarena is the new, I guess, spark plug for the Mariners lineup. And today, what did he do? Well, he got a hit. He drove in a run. Polanco was the big star. He got on base 3 times and scored all 3 times. So there we go. The Mariners fans, start counting down your magic number. We're going to see. We're going to see which team made the deal. Inevitably, there was a trade that was made that gave us all a shrug, and that player will come up big this October, and we'll say, oh, man, that was an under-the-radar move. So there you go. Thanks for those of you who listen to this online. Some of you are in the chat right now. And let's talk about that for the trivia question. Who was the last World Series MVP to be acquired at the trade deadline or to be acquired in midseason? That's your trivia question right now. That may be an easy one, but you know what? Sometimes I can give it a layup. So follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or whatever it's called now on Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Someone got upset that I said Twitter or whatever it's called now. Get over that. We're still all calling it Twitter. Relax. And relax and enjoy, because we got a bunch of games coming up, and we're going to now see who's going to benefit the most. This has been Locked On MLB. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.